You've got 7 minutes. Over 7 minutes. A lot of what?
Food left out.
Okay. Right.
Testing, testing. You can hear me. Everything good?
Yeah, came through fine.
Cool.
90 seconds. Seconds. Shabbat Shalom, everybody, and welcome to all our dearest friends. Glad to have you here at the Dennis House, or as we say in Hebrew, Casa Dennis. It's great to be able to gather together once again for Shabbat, and it's even better to anticipate that, I don't know, maybe this will be the last time you have to see my living room or not. I don't know for sure, but things are improving. Things are improving all the time. So, be that as it may, I welcome you into the Dennis House and our worship together. So let's start out with community matters. And that means tov uvracha, good and blessing, any good and blessing that people have to report. So I'm going to begin with the existing list that I have of the things we know, but I'm sure there are unknown blessings happening all the time, and I welcome you all sharing them with us. All right. So first of all, we have a number of birthdays this week. So we're going to think of Daniela Barnier. We're also thinking of Adam Cohen and Charlie Dower, Brian Topelson, Kayvon Bernstein, Thomas Collins, and Tom Morris. So we've got a double Tom. And of course, the word tom in Hebrew means twins. So I don't know, there's something symbolic in that. All right. In addition to that, we have a couple of anniversaries. We've got Robert and Shirley Elfont, and we have Bert and Joanne Barnes. So, and now it's time to hear if anybody had, let me add one thing from my own perspective, and that is we are somewhere between 2.5 million and 3 million Texans who have been vaccinated. When I was working this week at the Texas Motor Speedway, they had a wonderful little declaration that we had achieved 100,000, and that was 3 days ago. So hopefully we're far beyond that. But in any case, though we don't know the exact number, we're making progress, and that's wonderful. So I do see that there was one other post from, let's see, who was it? All right. Oh, we have some Mishaberak list editions. So we'll get to that, but we're not there yet. And otherwise, both of my owls are doing great. They say hello. And I hope all the rest of you. Who else? Anybody else have a good and blessing to share with us? All right. So I'm going to assume not at this point. So I am now going to turn my camera towards my beloved wife, who is going to be kindling the lights of Shabbat. Then she's going to say them, and then Lindsay's going to sing them. So here we go. What could go wrong? There it is. All right.
Hello,
and there she is. Shabbat Shalom, my dear.
Shabbat Shalom.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu להדליק נר של שבת.
Now it's our time to continue with our Kabbalat Shabbat, honoring the progress of the week. And now that we have reached this culmination, we're going to say a couple of psalms in honor of the weekdays, and then we're going to sing Lecha Dodi in honor of Shabbat. So we're going to begin on page 2 if you're using our Siddur, and we're going to be starting with Psalm 95, Lechuna Ranina. Now we're going to turn to page 3 for Psalm 97. Our Torah portion this week is Ki Tisa, and there's actually an intersection between our Torah portion and this particular psalm, which refers to the mystery of God, a God who is obscured from our sight, that we cannot perceive, and yet we experience moments of illumination. Such is the thing also said in our Torah portion, but we're going to declare it in this particular form here. So we join together in honoring God's authority and his miraculous, concealed and revealed nature. Adonai reigns, let the land exalt and the many islands rejoice. Dense clouds surround God, righteousness and justice are the foundation of God's throne. And God's lightning illumines the world. So light is sown for the righteous and radiance for the upright. O you who are righteous, rejoice in Adonai and acclaim God's holy name. We're going to turn now to Psalm 29 on page 6, and we're going to go ahead and I'll lead the chanting of this particular passage, and then we'll go to the English. Havu l'Adonai b'nei Elim, Havu l'Adonai kavod v'oz, Havu l'Adonai kavod shemo, Ishtachavu l'Adonai b'hadrat kodesh. Adonai oz le'amo yitain, Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom. Ascribe to Adonai, you children of God. Ascribe to Adonai glory and strength. Ascribe to Adonai the glory of God's name, and worship Adonai in the beauty of holiness. May Adonai give strength to this people. May Adonai bless this people with peace. We turn the page, and now we begin our Shabbat in song, as we did with light, with Lecha Dodi. And I turn it over to Lindsay.
ונשבנך בנה, שמור וזכור ודיבור אחד, השמיענו ונביאומן, אדוני אחד ושמו אחד, ושמו תפארת ולתחילה. להודותי לקראת קלה, אני שמרך בנה, להודותי לקראת קלה, אני שמרך בנה, לקראת שבת לכומנך, מיקי מקור הברכה, מראש מקדם לסוכה, סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה. להודותי לקראת קלה, ונשמרך בנה, להודותי לקראת קלה, ונשמרך בנה. Kitorari, kivaorei, uri, shirta beiri, kevod Adonai Hanayim nida. Lehatoti lekrat kala, ונשמרך בנה, להודותי לקראת קלה, ונשמרך בנה. בואי בשלום לעטרת חנה, גם בשמחה ובצהלה, טוב אמוננו גם סגולה, בואי חלה, בואי חלה. להודותי לקראת קלה, ונשמרך בנה, להודותי לקראת קלה, ונשמרך בנה.
So rouse yourself, for your light has come. Arise, shine, awaken, awaken. Give forth a song. The glory of Adonai is revealed to you. So come in peace, you crown of your husband, with rejoicing and with joy, to those who are faithful, a treasured people. Come, O Sabbath, come, O bride. It is an interesting structural problem we have here at the Dennis house, that normally I would just turn the camera around and open the door for Lecha Dodi, but my dog would just leave. So we can't do that. So hopefully in the weeks ahead, we'll be able to return to our customary practice. With that, I'm going to ask Lindsay to step up once again to lead us in the Hatzi Kaddish.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, בעלמא יברהירותי וימליך מלכותי, להרגונו ביומכון וחיי בכל בית ישראל. עגלה בעגלה ובזמן קריב, ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך, לעלם ולעלמי עלמיה, יתברך, יתברך וישתבח, ויפאר ויתרומם וינשא, ויתהלל, 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 שמי קדושה בריהו, לילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, ושפחתה ונחמתה, דמירן בעלמא, ואמרו אמן.
So I have now been able to isolate my laptop enough that I can actually move the camera around without creating any havoc. There we go. I can avoid creating any havoc because I've isolated the camera. So now I can stand for the Baruch Hu, but I'm still going to turn it over to Lindsay to lead it.
La 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 la
And now, having reached the end of a lovely day, it seems most appropriate to recite Ma'ariv Aravim, a celebration of both day and night as a great gift of God's constancy. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bitvaro Ma'ariv Aravim, v'chochma potech sha'arim, u'vitunah meshane itim, u'machalif et hazmanim, ומסדר את הכוכבים במשמרותיהם ברקיע כרצונו. בורא יום ולילה, כולל אור מפני חושך וחושך מפני אור. ומבדיל יום ומביא לילה, ומבדיל בין יום ובין לילה. אדוני צבאות שמו. אל חי וקיים תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני, מעריב ערבים. And it's a good time, too, for us to celebrate the sense of God's unerring love for the world that God has created. Unending is your love for your people, the house of Israel, Torah, mitzvot, laws, and precepts you have taught us. Therefore, Adonai, our God, when we lie down and when we rise up, we will meditate on your laws and rejoice in your Torah and mitzvot forever. Day and night we will reflect on them, for they are our life and the length of our days, and then your love shall never depart from our hearts. Blessed is Adonai, who loves this people, Israel. And now we continue with Lindsay taking over the Shema.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem, Kevod Malchuto, Leolam Vaed.
And now I'll sit down. Those of you who are standing can sit down, and Lindsay will continue leading us in the Via Hafta, the command for us to love.
הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם ושבתך בביתך ובלכלך בדרך ובשופטך ובקומך ופשטם להוט על ידיך, והיו לטפחות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם עשיתם את כל מצוותיי, הייתם קדושים לאלוהיהם. אני אדוני אלוהיהם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות להם אלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיהם.
And now we haven't quite reached the month of Nisan yet, but we are approaching Passover, Pesach, very quickly. And now is the time when this particular prayer comes into high relief. We are reminded that we are essentially a people because God delivered us from Egypt and made us into a holy nation. And so we recite praises to God. Emet ve'emunah. True and enduring, beloved and precious, awesome, good, and beautiful is this eternal teaching. This truth we hold to be forever certain. Adonai is our ruler, the rock of Jacob, the shield of our salvation. Adonai, our God, you redeemed us from Egypt, and you set us free from the house of bondage. For this, the people who felt your love sang songs of praise to you. Living God, high and exalted, mighty and awesome, who humbles the proud, raises the lowly, who frees the captive and redeems the oppressed, who is the answer to all who cry out. All praise to God Most High, the source of blessing. Like Moses and Israel, we sing this song of rejoicing, the Michamocha. The evening outside our window right now is cool and crisp, and we pray that some of the peace and soothing presence of that night is also experienced inside of our homes and inside of our hearts as we prepare to retire. Hashkivenu. Grant that we lie down in peace, Adonai our God, and raise us up tomorrow, O Sovereign, to a life renewed. Spread over us the shelter of your peace, guide us with your good counsel, and for your name's sake be our help. And shield us from hatred and plague. Keep us from war, famine, and anguish. Subdue our own inclination to evil. O God, our guardian and helper, our gracious and merciful sovereign, give us refuge in the shadow of your wings. O guard our coming and our going, that always we have life and peace. We praise you, O God, whose sukkah of peace is spread over our homes, over all your people Israel, and over Jerusalem. And now we come to the next part of our service, the blessings that we recite, 7 of them on Shabbat. And we begin once again by rising up, and I'm going to turn it over to Lindsay to lead us through the first 3 blessings of the Amidah, the standing prayer.
Adonai sepata kiftahu fi tehillattecha. Adonai, open up my lips and my mouth may declare your praise. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו, אלוהי אברהם, אלוהי יצחק ואלוהי יעקב, אלוהי שרה, אלוהי רבקה, אלוהי רחל ואלוהי לאה, האל הגדול הגיבור והנורא, העליון גומל חסדים טובים וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לפני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה, מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן. ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם בעזרת שרה, אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, ומחיי הכל אתה רב להושיע, מחכה חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר, מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומי דומה לה, מלך ממית ומחיה ומטמיע ישוע, בנאמן אתה להיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי הכל. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יהלוך סלע. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
There we go. And now we continue on with a blessing for Shabbat. In this particular case, we're going to be using Vishamru, which appeared in last week's Torah portion. And the translation is always worth hearing. So before we start, the children of Israel shall keep the Shabbat, observing the Shabbat in every generation as an eternal covenant. It is a sign, an oath, forever between me and the children of Israel. For in 6 days Adonai God made heaven and earth, and on the 7th day he rested and was refreshed. Vishamru, everyone.
Vishamru b'nei Israel et ha-Shabbat, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ולעולם. בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ולעולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל, בני ישראל, עוד תהי לעולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ולעולם. איש ששת ימים עשה אדוני, עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ולעולם. וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ולעולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות נותן השבת, לדורותם בעיתונם.
We turn now to the prayer Reitzei on page 22. I just want to mention that this is one of the prayers that was radically revised by the Reform movement. Originally, this prayer asked God to restore the sacrificial service in Jerusalem. We live in Texas, and the truth of the matter is we always know what a pleasing odor to the Lord smells like every time we go to barbecue. So we don't really need the temple in that way. And instead, we've modernized it to ask God to receive our prayers and to that we as the people may find acceptance before the Holy One of Blessing. Reitzei. Reitzei Adonai Eloheinu ba'amcha Yisrael u'tefilatam ba'ahava tikabel u'tehi l'ratzon tamid avodat Yisrael amecha baruch atah Adonai she'otecha levadcha ve'ira na'avod. May the worship of your people always be acceptable. For you alone do we hold in reverence. And we offer our thanks also, Modim. We give thanks to you, Adonai, our God and God of our ancestors. You are the rock of our lives, the shield of our salvation for every generation. We thank you and we recite your praises. Let all the living affirm you and praise your name as the God of our salvation and help. Praised are you, Adonai. Goodness is your name. All praises to you. Baruch atah Adonai hatov shimcha lecha ne'eh lehodot. Now, we always conclude these 7 blessings with the greatest blessing, perhaps aside from God, the blessing of peace. We're going to sing Shalom Rav. We're going to take a few moments for our own silent prayers and meditation. And just in case we didn't get our point across, we're going to ask for peace again with Osei Shalom. But we start now with asking God for overflowing, manifold peace. Shalom Rav.
Shalom Rav al Israel amar, nasim leolam. Shalom Rav al Israel amar, nasim leolam. Yatahu melech Adon, lechol hashalom. Yatahu melech Adon, lechol hashalom. Shalom Rav al Israel amar, nasim leolam. Shalom Rav al Israel amar, nasim leolam. Letov beideva levarei et zamcha Yisrael. בכל עת ובכל שעה לשלומך. שלום רב על ישראל אמר, נושאים לעולם. שלום רב על ישראל אמר, נושאים לעולם. נושאים לעולם. נושאים לעולם.
We continue now with Osei Shalom.
Osei Shalom, בקרומה, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. יעשה שלום, יעשה שלום, שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. עושה שלום בקרומה, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל. ואמרו
Well, I have to begin with a salachti, asking your forgiveness. I fully intended to have a taste of Torah this week, but I recorded it twice, and each time there turned out to be a problem. So after multiple efforts to try and do this at home, it didn't work. The good news is I only had to write one devar for this week. And so this is it. You're going to get to hear what I was going to give a taste of Torah. So let's talk a little bit about our Torah portion this week, which comes from Ki Tisa. But I have to start out with something. Before I get to the Jewish value, the homily that we draw from this, I have to tell a little academic Jewish analysis of our Torah portion. So, you know, when it's cold and power keeps going in and out and things like this, there's nothing I like to do more than curl up with a nice, densely footnoted article on something about the Bible with a cup of coffee and, you know, and a cookie or something and read it. And this past week, I read a pretty interesting article on narrative conventions in the Hebrew Bible. And the one it particularly talked about, which really applies to this particular portion, is a special way that you tell a story about building a sacred structure. Now, you would think that this story could be told any number of ways, but as it turns out, if you look not only at Hebrew literature, but the literature of the surrounding time period in other cultures, the story of building an exalted house for divinity follows a pretty standard pattern, and it goes something like this. The hero, usually a king or a priest, but in our case, Moses, is commissioned by God, to build a sacred structure. Normally, this is a permanent structure, but in Moses's case, we're building the Mishkan, the portable sanctuary, and just as happens in Exodus 25 until our Torah portion this week, all the plans are made and all the descriptions are laid out and all the processes for the creation of the temple and its accoutrement, its clay kodesh, its sacred containers and objects is all being worked out. But then, the convention is that an obstacle arises for our hero. All right. Now, if you look at what is written in Babylonian and Ugaritic or even in Egyptian narratives of building a sacred structure, usually this obstacle comes in the form of a war or a famine or a revolt that prevents the king or priest from pursuing his task. Oddly enough, something like that happens in our Torah portion, but it's a uniquely Jewish one. It's not a war, it's not a famine, it's not a revolt in the conventional sense of it. It's the building of the golden calf. It's just so archly Jewish, you know? It's about the people getting caught up in the idea that maybe they don't quite get this right. They're anxious, they're worried, and so they try and solve the problem on their own, and it leads to catastrophe. And so the hero has to come and fix everything before the sacred structure can be completed, which is exactly what our Torah portion is about. All right, now let's move beyond that, since we now know that our tradition participates in the ancient Near East in a very, very obvious kind of way. Let's talk about how this particular convention plays out in a Jewish kind of way, okay? So what we have is Exodus 32. The people become deeply, deeply anxious, and they worry because Moses is not with them. They're not sure about the nature of God. So they build a calf, really a golden bull, for the purposes of representing divinity for themselves. And God, realizing what's going on down on the ground where Moses is up on the mountain getting the 10 commandments and getting all the instructions, God says, hey, your people, notice how that voice of the disapproving parent, your people are acting out, go down there and fix that. And so he does. He goes down and he confronts the people and he addresses the issue. And then in the subsequent chapter, Moses experiences the revelation of the 13 attributes of God, and he carves the second set of tablets and renews the covenant, and the obstacle is overcome. So why this obstacle? It is a puzzle, as a chief rabbi of the British Empire said, a puzzle in the shape of Jewish spirituality. What makes chapter 33, the middle chapter, so perplexing is first that it's not really clear what its purpose is, and we have struggled for decades and centuries to understand that. Second, Moses interrupts the action with a strange request. He says, God, show me your ways, show me now your glory. Is that really our priority at this moment? I mean, the people are falling apart. They've been punished. Ringleaders have been executed. God is angry. The people are discouraged and demoralized. And now Moses makes a personal request for a bit of insight into God. This is a metaphysical insight he's asking for. He's not asking for any sort of form of forgiveness for the people who are traumatized. All right. So why is this happening? And then, of course, part of the problem is the calf itself. We have to understand what it's really about. You know, it certainly is an idol. There's no question about that. But the text then states that the people declare of this idol, this Israel is your God that brought you out of Egypt. An idol, not of a foreign God, but of the God of Israel. It also says they sought the calf because they were worried about what happened to Moses while he was up receiving the commandments on Mount Sinai. He'd been gone a long time. So the question is, were they seeking a replacement for God, or were they seeking a replacement for Moses? What precisely is the nature of this sin? Then there is an odd detail that starts up fairly early in the chapter, in chapter 33, and that is Moses declares in the midst of this crisis that he's going to take his tent, which is called the tent of meeting. It's like a sheik's tent where Moses lives in it, but it's also where he does all of his consultations. All right, so he takes the tent of meeting, his personal tent, and he has it pitched outside the camp. Why this sudden housekeeping? And why are we suddenly ignoring the golden calf? In any case, it seems to be the worst possible decision for a leader to do at that time and under those circumstances. The people are deeply distressed. They literally went into mourning. That's what the Torah says. We intuitively sense that for a leader to leave their people while the crisis is unfolding is precisely the wrong thing to do. And yet, Moses does what seems to be precisely the wrong thing. For Moses then to leave the camp must have been doubly demoralizing for the people. In a time of crisis, we expect a leader to be close to the people, not distant from them. Now, the previous chapter implied that the people panicked because of the absence of Moses, their leader, and God himself implies as much when he says to Moses, go down because your people who you brought out of Egypt have become corrupt. So somehow it's Moses's absence, the source of this problem. But Moses maybe understands the deeper aspect of this, maybe even more, perhaps, if I could say so, than God himself. He does go down, he does punish the guilty, he does pray for God to forgive the rest of the people, and he restores order, and then he moves out of camp. He was, in effect, saying to both the people and to God, what the people need is not me to be close to them. I'm just flesh and blood. I'm just your designated agent. The calf reveals that what the people are craving is you, God. You are their God. They need you to be in the midst of the camp. Up until now, the Israelites really don't understand the God of Israel. He is terrifying. He's a terrifying God. He sends 10 plagues upon the enemies of Egypt. He's an elemental force. He causes seas to split and destroys an army. The people have been experiencing the power of God, but not the proximity of God. They haven't really been able to get a sense of God's caring. What they're looking for is not God's grand presence on top of a mountain, but as a comforting presence in the valley where they are at. Perhaps this is why Moses removes his tent from the camp, as if to say to God, it's not my presence the people need, it's yours. This may also be why Moses interrupts the action and sought to understand the nature of God himself. Could God show Moses, and Moses explained to the people, God's softer side, a more compassionate aspect to God? That is what God causes, in fact, to pass by as Moses stood in the cleft of the rock. We do not know at this stage exactly what God's glory is, but apparently it centers on the idea that God is long-suffering and compassionate, tolerant and loving, something that we needed to hear and the people needed to hear. And then it goes on to describe the glory a couple of chapters later as a cloud that covered the tent of meeting, which apparently has now moved back in. Moses has now moved in once the new sanctuary has been built, and the glory of God filled the Mishkan, the portable sanctuary. And Moses could not enter the tent of meeting because the cloud had settled on it, and the glory of God filled the Mishkan. So now we see the wise leader responding to the deeper problem of the golden calf. Moses pleaded with God to come closer to the people so that they would encounter him not only in the form of mighty miracles, but more regularly on a daily basis, and not only as a force that threatens to destroy and punish, but as a comforting presence that can be sensed and witnessed at the very heart of the people. That is why Moses builds the tabernacle. It allows God, in the first place, to be in a sanctuary where, as God puts it, I will dwell among them. Moses reminds the people that it is most important. God is the most important thing, but he also reminds God, as it were, that the most important thing is to be close to the people he loves. It's not enough for us as the Jewish people, for God to be God in the cosmic sense. Divinity needs to be the God of Israel, the construct God, the God connected to us. That's the meaning of this moment. And that is the wisdom of Jewish spirituality. Polytheism, at least at that time, did not envision God in such abstract and awe-inspiring way as the source of all things, without shape or form, larger than the universe, more eternal than time itself. And yet no religion has ever felt God to be closer than we do. In the Tanakh, the patriarchs and the prophets argue with God, negotiate with God. In the book of Psalms, we address God as our kinsman. In the Talmud, God listens to the debates between the sages and accepts their rulings, even when they go against the heavenly intention. This aspect of relationship that is multifaceted, like a parent and a child, or between a husband and a wife, or like that between two infatuated lovers. But it's also sometimes two frustrated and disappointed lovers. You know, we sing Yedid Nefesh on some Shabbatot, the poem attributed to the Kabbalists that talks about God taking us into his arms. And we sing Lecha Dodi every Shabbat, which speaks of God in the most intimate terms as loving us. That is one of the most striking differences you may observe in what it is to have a synagogue versus, say, what it is to have a cathedral. In a cathedral, you sense God's vastness and the smallness of humanity in comparison. But if you stand in a synagogue, as the European synagogues that Bruce and I visited a couple of years ago, the whitewashed Alterschule in Prague, or the sky blue synagogue of the Ari in Safed in Israel, you sense the closeness of God and the intimate and ultimate closeness of humanity to one another. Many nations worship God, but Jews are the only people to count themselves as his kinsmen. As it says in Exodus, my child, my firstborn, Israel. And that is why we are a communitarian religion. And that's why we've suffered so much this last year. It's hard to be Jewish alone, maybe impossible. And that's why we often gather to commune with the divine. We can, like Moses, stand on the side of the mountain and be alone for a time with God, and that's awesome. But the thing that makes our trials bearable is that often knowing we are not alone, that we are close to one another, and that closeness itself enhances our feeling of God's presence. So we are hopefully coming to a close eventually, soon, to a year of being too alone. The word of God has broken down a bit. The world itself seems to be not as functional as it once was. Our own sacred structure is not in the kind of condition that we would like it to be in. But it seems that the obstacles are drawing to a close, that we can rebuild, that we, like Moses, can continue our project of building our Jewish community and building our world, that karuv, closeness, is once again within our grasp. So I'm hoping that sooner rather than later, we will all be reunited. Shabbat Shalom. So now, with a mysterious transition, we go from the sermon to our announcements, and I pull out the page with the announcements. I have to note, you know, I included a Purim announcement, a bit of a Purim spiel announcement last week about how we're going to do Pesach, Passover, at medieval times, you know, rabbis riding on horses and cantors cantering and angry mobs and knights and all this sort of thing. And it was great fun, but I have to admit, apparently a couple of people really thought that being the kind of rabbi I am, I was serious. But I wasn't. It would be cool, but I don't think we can get away with it. So it'll be something a little more conventional than Passover Seder at medieval times, just for any of you who are still in doubt. Here are our real announcements. The building currently remains closed, but on Monday, March 8th, progress is coming. The CKA office will reopen. All of the parts of the building we have to keep closed at this time. The sprinkler system, however, has been repaired, and so it's okay for us to reoccupy the office. Since we are still awaiting remediation of the building, and we keep discovering little things here and there that we have to worry about, the sanctuary is not yet in a state where we can feasibly hold services. So hang tough, hold tight. We are working as quickly as we can, and we'll get and let you know when we can return to having people in the building again. In the meantime, however, as comfort to us all, we have the Sisterhood virtual cooking decoration. All right. The Sisterhood invites you to join them to an online cookie decorating class. The class will be held Monday, March 22nd at 6:30 p.m. The cookie kits must be purchased in advance so that they can be prepped and given to you prior to the class. In order to RSVP, please bring or mail a check to CKA office. The checks should be made out to Sisterhood. You can find out more details and specifics where? On the Kol Ami website. This is I guess this is our last Chumetz fling before we get to Passover with cookies. So I think you should jump in there and have that experience. We also have something coming immediately after Pesach, which is the CKA blood drive, which will be happening on April 10th from noon until 4 o'clock. Our last one was a tremendous success. We filled every slot. We did blood offerings of the best kind, all right, that benefited scores of people. That's something that all of us can contribute to. If you would like to donate your blood, please sign up ahead of time. There are a limited number of slots. They can only get so many people in and out of that bus in the time set. You want to get there early so that you can pick up the mitzvah score that you get from doing that. You'll find all the details and a link to sign up on where? On the CKA website. Now, I'm just going to check and see if anybody added any other announcements. Yes, it did. It was in character for me to propose the, it certainly came out of my mind. But it's not realistic. It's okay. All right. No other announcements? Okay. All right. So with that now, it's time for us to think about a mishabera, to think about those who are suffering in body or suffering in spirit. We want to include them in our prayers. We want to draw ourselves tightly together as a community and extend words and hearts of comfort and peace to everyone who is suffering. On our immediate list, our standing list, we have the following individuals that we ask the one of blessing to bless these people: Harry Anthony, Eli Arts, Jackie Baldo, Joe Baldo, Natalie Bovino, Catherine Buxbaum, Deanna Dorio, Maxine Collins, Sandy Cook, Dave Cook, Darwin Day, Jerry Dietz, Pat Ducar, Gordon Ellison, Tammy Ferris, Joanne Felder Rhodes, Debbie Freed, Ron Gardner, Michelle Griffin, James Hart, Ken Hirschman, Jody Hoffman, Deb Kaufman, Lauren Koenig, Alex Koenig, Alice Korn, Sandy Lenzner, Bob McLaren, Karen Moore Kanakoli, Judy Morsack, Herbert Paley, Joe Reddish, Nancy Redman, Lisa Rosilio. You can correct me on any of these. Send me an email if I'm not getting them right. Adrian Sandler and Myra Schussler. We also have posted on our chat Susan Berger. We already know about Maxine, Tom Holliday, and Marion Kaplan. So let's include all of those people in our thoughts and prayers as we recite our Misabera, hoping that they will have a refuah shlema, a rapid and as complete as possible recovery. I turn it over to Lindsay.
Who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing. Let us say Amen. Lord Abraham, Rabotenu, bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit. Let us say Amen.
And now, once again, able to stand because of this minor triumph of technology and control of my laptop, I invite you all to join me in the Aleinu. If you can stand, that's great. If you can't or don't want to, that's okay. Aleinu, page 82. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, latet gerula yotzer breshit, shelo asanu kagoye haratzot, velo samanu kamishpachot adama, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. Turn the page. שהוא נותן שמיים ויוסד ארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו בגובה מרומים. הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, אמת מלכנו אפס זולתו, כך כתוב בתורתו, וידעת היום והשבותה אל לבביך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחת אין עוד. And now we sing those words that remind us that we are constructing a better world with God. Bayom hahu, Yeh Adonai echad, Ushemo echad. And on that distant day, God shall at last be one, and God's reputation shall be one. Now we go on to think about all those individuals who have passed away, whether it be recently or at this season in years past. And I take up our list. We begin with our Shiva. We have Dr. Marcia Bark, the friend and colleague of Dr. Amanda Levin Russo, who died this week. Does anybody else have a Shiva to share with us? Doesn't look like it. So I'm going to go on to Shloshim. For Shloshim, we're thinking of B.J. Kirkwood, the father of Meredith Neria, and the grandfather of Carrie Roberts. We're also thinking of No, and I think that's pronounced No Garcia, the friend of Deborah Fripp. Is there anybody else that wants to add a Shloshim on the chat line? We don't see anyone typing, so we're going to go on to our yard sites. We're going to take a moment to think of all those people connected to our communities whose anniversaries of death are this week. As we think of them, we think of those who love them. We hope that those people, that their memories grow in sweetness over the years. We're thinking for the yard sites of Harry Bornstein, Anne Egbert, George Gilbert, Robert J. Harris, Betty Helfman, Pearl Hoffman, Edward Klipka, Lisa Margolis, Floyd McCoy III, Sue Morton, and Sudi Zane. Anybody else know of a yard site this week? All right. While I remain standing, I'm going to lead us in Kiddush. You may stand or sit according to your circumstances. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divrach yurutei v'yamlich malchutei v'chayechon v'yomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael bagalal u'bizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam u'lamei amaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei dekudsha b'rechu Eila min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbakata v'nechmata, damiran be'alma, v'imru, amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn and comfort all of the bereaved among us. Since our theme of our Torah portion and our Devar was that of drawing close together and continuing the project of building the world and building the Jewish community, we've selected a contemporary Israeli folk song, one that is celebrated and used in camps and places all over the world. It's called Ani ve'ata. And the rough translation and all of the lyrics basically come down to you and I can change the world. It may not be easy, but we'll follow in the footsteps of those who've tried before. And you and I, we may be able to do it. So I'm going to turn it over to Lindsay, and then we'll finish up with Kiddush and Motzi. All right, everybody. Now it's time to draw our service to a close, though Shabbat is only just beginning. We're going to start with our tradition of Kiddush. We have wine and, oh, look at this. We're doubly armed. So I don't even have to hold this up as a prop. Lindsay's got the whole picture here. So I'm going to turn it over to Lindsay. We'll rejoice together. I'll turn off my voice.
Turn it off a little early. It's okay. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzav banu, v'shabbat kodsho ve'ahava u'ratzon hinhilanu. Zikaron lema'aseh bereshit, ki hu yom tehilah lenikae kodesh, zeher letziat mitzrayim, ki banu v'ata ve'otanu kidashta b'kol ha'amim, בשבת קודשך באהבה וברצון הנהלתנו. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת. אמן.
L'chaim. And now, it's not a Casey challah, sadly. It's a Jeff Dennis challah. And as a result, it's a little flatter at this end than it is at that end. But otherwise, it worked out okay. And so it's time for us to say a motzi. I have my dog here watching because in the Dennis house, motzi always concludes with something for the dog. So, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. And since the Talmud tells us we should always feed our animals before we feed ourselves, there you go. All right, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. And I hope you have a wonderful weekend and we see a better week dawning next week. Shabbat Shalom.
Thanks for being here, everybody. Shabbat Shalom.